Hey guys, here today with another Shirogorov knife video. Today we have in front of us the F95 Antheos. This piece was made available for lottery at TKI Spring just a week ago, towards the end of April. It's my local show. It's only about less than 10 minutes away. So really appreciate having the Shirogorov team come to me instead of me having to fly to shows, especially with the way things are going right now. Really appreciative that they're able to make it out. This knife, my friend was able to snag it and have it here for me to do this quick video on today, so really appreciate that. This was actually one of my favorite pieces at the show, even though it's a much more subtle configuration than some of the other knives that we had there, such as the full Tycron Stellar, for example, with the mirror polished blade. I really love the F95 design, and having this more plain configuration really appeals to me. So hopefully I'll be able to talk about those kind of points in this video, as well as kind of the origin of this knife in terms of the configuration and the appearance, which I think is very interesting, much more interesting than the knife would suggest with its plain titanium handles and just zirconium accents. But first, let's go ahead and do a size comparison real quick. I'm going to stop measuring F95 size knives since I've done so many times in my previous videos. You can see here up to next to a Hati and an F7, they are all the same size since they are based off the F95. That means you have that 4 inches of cutting length. I do want to measure the weight of this knife since this knife does have a thinner blade stock than normal. I expect it to weigh less, despite the fact that it does have zirconium hardware, this back spacer here, for example. And you can see we're looking at 4.23 ounces. So with the F95 Zero being just about 5 ounces, that is a noticeable weight difference, which I think is very nice. Again, for a knife that's in a user configuration, having something that's lighter, something unique like that is really cool. Taking like the coin here, you can see that we have the name of the knife, the F95 Antheos. The blade steel is M398, and the handle is made of titanium and zirconium. And this does have Sergey's double row roller bearing system, and we see here that he has signed the knife and dated the coin with February 2022. This is the new style coin with the bear's outlines on this side, and also the pivot screws encircling the Shirogorov bear logo on the other side. I noticed that this coin also has a much more refined finish on the polishing for the coin. Some of the recent ones have had the chaotic scratch satin finish, which I prefer this too. So that's something that's nice to have on this coin as well. Moving on to the blade here, you can see that we have, again, that thin blade stock of M398. I measured this one out at just a little bit under 3.5 millimeters. So I was thinking that this blade stock potentially was 3.5 millimeters. And then they had, Sergey had, finished it down to its current profile to kind of make everything work. You can see here we have a blade profile that's very similar to what we see in the new version of the F95 NL. So we have that, the wide belly blade, the extract cut with the jimping here up top, and the swedge as well. The flats are satin finished, and the primary bevel here has a very refined stonewash finish here. So you can see very, very nice. If we compare that to, say, a production knife, you can see that the finish is a little bit rougher. Sorry, this knife has some oils on it, but you can see the finish is a little bit rougher. Of course, all Shirogorov knives have a very refined blade finish compared to many other knife makers, but this one is just much nicer to look at, in my opinion. Moving on to the handle here, you can see we have this very beautiful milling pattern that consists of different sets of grooves here with different widths to the grooves depending on which portion of the knife you're looking at. Really nice milling pattern that, when you take a look at it closely, is much more complex than you would think when looking at it from far away. The handles are 3D contoured, and they are also quite thin. When combined with the handle of the knife just feels very slim to hold, which I really like a lot. You can see here that we have the zirconium pivot collars and also zirconium rear screw here with the custom duck foot pivot milled in the back here. So that's something a little bit different than we see on the productions and even the custom divisions as well. For both custom divisions and the customs, these show side screws are not really screws, they're more just aesthetic milled in portions here for indexing, especially on the pivot. This does not rotate. We have the actual screws here on the other side. This does, however, rotate, and it's been a while since Sergey has done an F95 configuration knife with the rear screw barrel visible on the show side, sorry. So as you can see here, he tends to clock them in this direction, which I find very interesting. Very little minor point here, but as you can see, for most of Sergey's newer knives, he's gone towards a configuration where he's trying to avoid a rear screw. This is very similar. I would say almost all new knives are like that nowadays, or he tries to minimize the appearance of the rear screw with something like, let's see here. With the Stellar right here, I've seen some customs where it'll be on the show side, but a very small screw around this size here. So very interesting to see the traditional F95 setup here with the rear screw assembly going entirely through the handle. Moving on to the lock side here, you can see we have that zirconium rear screw as well, and also the lock bar insert screw, all done in that custom pivot hardware. Really nothing too out of the ordinary for a custom. We also have this wonderfully milled 3D clip here. And it's been a while, I think, since we've seen this style F95 clip. The curved top here is very reminiscent of some of the earlier custom divisions, and personally my favorite style of clip here. Some of the newer ones, as you can see here, have kind of this faceting up top here, especially for the production knives, and I really love the curved style clip here. I think it just looks a little bit more elegant. Now, kind of the big elephant in the room for some of the more, more knowledged Shirogorov collectors is that the handle pattern for this knife was very, very similar to what we saw on the F95 Antique. Now, what a lot of people didn't know is that, yes, that while this pattern was used on the custom division F95 Antique from 2019, that pattern itself was actually borrowed off a very early custom. I believe around the 2014, 2015 timeframe. Now, that knife was done, I think there were two of them, at least picture that I've seen. One of them was in a kind of a PVD coated finish that was black, where the handle milling pattern was very visible. And then there was actually another one with the same pattern, but in Mokutai. So it was a little bit more difficult to make that pattern out. But the F95 Antique was not the first time that this pattern was used. But I find it interesting to see it here again on this custom knife, because the handles for this knife actually came from the custom division Antique batch. Now, the Antique had a kind of bronze anodization on the handles. As you can see here, this is just normal titanium. But it seems that what Sergey has done is actually taken some of these spares from that custom division limited run of 50 pieces and made a couple of knives out of them himself. So these are still customs, but the handles had just already been made. And because of that, there are actually some very interesting, kind of things that Sergey had to work around to make this knife kind of custom level. The second thing that I want to mention is, I did mention on the coin that it said that this knife had a double row roller bearing system. And you guys are probably thinking, if this knife was a custom division, and with custom divisions having single row roller bearings, how can this knife fit in double row rollers? Now, of course, it's true that this knife has single row roller bearings, or at least the handles were milled out that way. As you can see here, we have that marking, which is normal for all of the custom divisions. But this knife has Sergey's micro roller bearing system. So normal sugar bearings are 1.5 millimeters thick, both for the ball bearings and the roller bearings. But this has the 1 millimeter variant, which allows it to fit in the handles here better. And actually the reason why that had to even be done in the first place is because the F95 Antique was, I think, the only custom division, especially in the time frame that it was released in 2019, to not have any steel washers underneath the blade, underneath the bearings, to kind of provide wear resistance from the roller bearings riding on the titanium. Now, earlier custom divisions from, say, the 2016 time period did not have this, and so as an upgrade from, I believe, the 2017-2018 custom divisions. But when I had done my Antique and opened it up, and again, this was in 2019, the lack of that there really surprised me. I thought that was very interesting. So because for all of Sergey's customs, since they have steel washer underlays, he was working with a handle that was already machined out to not account for having a steel washer underneath the bearings. So because of that, it seems like what he's done is added probably like a 0.5 millimeter thick steel washer, and then added the bearings, which of course, since the knife was originally meant to have a 1.5 millimeter deep race, now he only has 1 millimeter to work with. So he used his micro roller bearing system. It is double row roller bearing. I have verified this. And it also does have Sergey's new pivot ring, phosphor bronze pivot ring. So basically the bearing cages have a press fit ring of phosphor bronze that is fit exactly to the width of the handle to the blade. This basically provides somewhat quasi benefits of these phosphor bronze washers. So the bearing cages, or the bearings inside the cages themselves, are protected by that seal of phosphor bronze, that very thin seal of phosphor bronze between the handle and the knife. So having such a thin layer, or thin ring of phosphor bronze, means that you're getting pretty much all of the benefits of the smoothness and drop shot action of bearings, but with that protection of the phosphor bronze ring, similar to washers. So very interesting system, and very interesting to see how he made this fit inside a knife that not only was designed to be single row roller bearings, like other custom division models, but also not even have steel washers in the first place. So really, really cool here. The inside of the handles is also satin finish. This is very similar to other customs, but something that we don't really see too much on the custom division. So that was another thing that he did as well. The internal milling is similar to what we see on the F95's custom divisions. But again, even back in the day when, Sergey's customs were just kind of fancy material versions of the F95, we had similar finishing as well. So really can't fault him too much on that, but I did find that interesting that he did also go that extra step to do satin finishing as well on the inside of the knife. Sorry, I didn't talk about the backspacer here. The backspacer is also zirconium here. You can see it has a tumbled finish. It would have been nice to see kind of a satin finish. I really prefer when Sergey satin finishes the zirconium, but it is zirconium to match the pivot collar and the rear screw. And you can see it's also dated, as we expect from any of Sergey's customs. Matches the date on the coin at February 2022. And also interestingly, we can see here that we have 2 out of 3 here. Now on custom divisions, this is where we would see the format for the serial number. But as you can see here, it looks like there are 2 other knives. I was told in different material configurations, so probably not zirconium, but using probably the custom division antique handle. So I really wonder what those other knives are going to be like. Probably we'll see them for lottery at future shows. But otherwise, other than that, the action is, of course, what you would expect from a custom. Honestly, the antiques that I've handled, they've all been a little bit less than drop shut. So it's really nice to have this one here and have it be really nice and smooth. But of course, what else should you expect from Sergey's customs? So really nice piece here. Again, I really like the user configuration. I really like the plainness of it. So I'm really happy for my friend to be able to snag this one. And I'm also really happy to kind of find out about the history of this knife. Not really history, since kind of the origin and the ideas behind, where Sergey came up with making these knives. I think it's really cool to have this as a lottery piece. Would I like a F7 for lottery? Of course, I think that'd be cooler, but this is interesting for me as well, as someone who pays attention to what Sergey is doing and kind of the history of Shurogorov knives. Another very interesting fact, now that you know that this knife is kind of has a lot of historical similarities to the F95 antique, Sergey did choose its name, the Antheos, as kind of a callback to antique. I think just because they're related in sound. I don't know. Same thing with the Hati magnetic, and Hati magnetic being magnetic because of the magnesium dust. I guess they sound kind of similar, so Sergey thought it was a cool thing to do. So that does explain the name. Really don't know what Antheos has anything to do with configuration, which is something that usually the customs are named after the materials that are used or some kind of theme that it evokes. But this one, Antheos, because the handles are from the antique. Okay, well, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I really like doing this one, and have a couple more videos to do, a couple more knives to do. I have a pretty big backlog, so I hope you guys enjoy that, but hope to see you guys next time, and have a great rest of your day.